Autumn was walking around the neighborhood and found a cat. She put posters all over the place looking for its owner. 2 people came and claimed that the cat was theirs. Can you figure out who the real owner is? Both people have scratches and cat hair on their clothes, so they must both own a cat. But the cat Autumn found has red fur. This woman right here is the only one with red cat hairs on her clothes. So she must be the real owner. Aurora failed an exam and her mother grounded her. Aurora was supposed to stay at home for 2 weeks. No parties, no friends, just her and physics. Mrs. Adams was a nurse and she worked long shifts. One evening, she came back home after 18 hours at work. She walked into Aurora's room and asked her what she'd been doing all day. "Studying, Mom," replied Aurora and pointed at her physics books. Mrs. Adams didn't believe her and asked her who had come over. How did she figure it out? Look, there are 2 cups in Aurora's room. Both of them have lipstick stains. One stain has the same shade as Aurora's lipstick, but the other is different. Someone else had been drinking tea with Aurora that evening before Mrs. Adams came back home. The police are looking for a vampire who repeatedly moved to the neighborhood a couple of weeks ago. They need to identify him to keep an eye on him. They have 3 suspects. Here are the photos of them. Can you guess which one is the vampire? This person is tanned. It means that he goes out in the sun, which vampires never do. This woman is wearing a silver necklace. Vampires are afraid of silver, so she went out too. So this last person is probably the vampire. Bonnie is a little spider competing in a spider championship, and she got into the finals. In the final round, she's competing with last year's champion, King Weber. The final round is a walk on a spider's web that stretches between 2 cliffs. There are 5 intersecting strands, coming from one point on the other side. Bonnie and Weber begin 2 spaces from each other. She starts first, and her task is to catch Weber in 10 moves. Now, the rules. Every competitor can move from one intersection to an adjacent hub where 2 strands cross, 1 space at a time. No one can create new paths. Only one competitor can move at a time, and they take turns walking. No one can skip their turn. Help Bonnie come up with a strategy to catch King Weber in 10 moves. The first thing we need to pay attention to is that Bonnie is 2 spaces away from King Weber. So no matter what move Bonnie makes, King Weber will be able to maintain the 2-space distance, and she won't be able to get closer to him. But there's a way to change it. There's this point where the strands converge, and this is the key. Let's visualize the web and color the intersections blue and red in a checkerboard pattern. I mean the pattern where the squares of the same color don't border. The point where the strands meet can't be colored either of these colors, so let's color that one green. So now, Bonnie stands at red. Every time she changes her color location from red to blue, King Weber will then change it in the same way, always staying 2 moves away from her. So, if she doesn't change the situation, this will go on, and she won't be able to win. The only place where Bonnie can break this pattern is that one green point. So, she shouldn't waste any moves and go straight there. It will take her 4 moves to end up in the green spot. Since King Weber started at a red point, after 4 moves, he will be at one of the red points again. Now, Bonnie has to break the pattern so that with every move, they're at 2 different colors. Because then, there's a possibility to end up at the adjacent ones. Bonnie should move to one of the strands with a red point. King Weber will then be at a blue one with his next move. Even better, he can't now move to any of the blue hubs near Bonnie. So, he will be forced to move away to some other blue points. Now the algorithm for choosing the correct move is this. Bonnie should assess how far away Weber is from her horizontally and vertically, and then cut the larger number. King Webber will still have hubs where he can't move, so he'll be forced to move away, backing into one of the two corners. And that's where Bonnie will get him. Let's take a little break and solve some emoji riddles. And the topic is movies. I'll show you a combination of emojis, and your task is to guess the movie. Ready? Here's the first one. Yes, this one is easy. It's The Lord of the Rings. Okay, a new one for you, a bit harder. What's your guess? Well, it wasn't really that hard. It's Forrest Gump, a classic. What about this one? Probably the most famous franchise. This is Star Wars, of course. I'll give you a hint. This is an animated movie. Yes, of course, it's Coco. Okay, the last movie for today. Can you guess it? It's Transformers. Now, back to solving cases. A rich lady, Mrs. Harrington, went on a sea cruise. The voyage was pleasant, but one night there was a storm. During the commotion, Mrs. Harrington got robbed. Her diamond necklace and rings disappeared right from her neck and hands. The main suspect was Brian, a young man traveling in the economy class. Someone had seen him on the deck circling around Mrs. Harrington. Detective Callum happened to be on the cruise too, and he interrogated Brian, but the man denied stealing anything. The ship was rocking, and I couldn't stay on the deck, so I was in my cabin writing a letter to my wife. Here's the letter. You can read it if you want to. Detective Callum concluded that Brian was lying. Why did he think so? The ship was rocking during the storm, and it must have been hard to write anything. Still, the letter is written neatly, which is impossible when everything around is swinging and shaking. Ayla was traveling by plane for the first time and was very excited. She was going to Florida to visit her grandma. 2 hours into the flight, Ayla went to the bathroom. When she returned, she noticed that her tablet had disappeared. She immediately reported it to the flight attendant. Ayla's neighbor said he'd been sleeping and hadn't seen anything. The neighbor across the aisle said he'd been talking to his friend on the phone, so he hadn't seen anything either. And one more passenger said she hadn't left her seat. The flight attendant stopped interrogating people because she figured out who was lying. Who was it? The second person. They're on a plane, there's no connection, and no one is supposed to talk on the phone. An accident happened at a birthday celebration in a club. Damon, a sophomore, found Eleanor in the ladies' bathroom with a concussion. He called the police and the girl was taken to the hospital. The police arrived and asked the boy what had happened. I don't know Eleanor that well. We have one class together. I was upstairs at the party talking to my friends and then just went to the bathroom and found her there. I called you immediately. The officers took Damon to the police station for further investigation. What was so suspicious in this story? Eleanor was in the women's bathroom. What was Damon doing there?
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.